Hi, and welcome to Admissions Live, the weekly web show for college admissions professionals. We broadcast on the Higher Ed Live Network, a product of ED Universe Media. Tune into Admissions Live on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on higheredlive.com and join in on the conversation on Twitter using the Admissions Live hashtag. I am your guest host, Nicole Lentine, and tonight I am joined by Bret Dewhurst, Senior Assistant Director of Admissions at Champlain College, and Timothy Lipman, Event Coordinator at Illinois Institute of Technology. And in just a moment, we'll be talking about on- and off-campus admissions events. But we can't do that without first giving a shout out to the sponsors that make Admissions Live possible. Admissions Live is sponsored by Zinch. On Wednesday, September 18th, 2013, from 6 to 9 p.m., Zinch invites you to join Hockey's Greats by posing for a picture with Lord Stanley's Cup as part of our reception, Rethinking Education, at the 2013 NACAC Conference in Toronto. This is, of course, in addition to the opportunity to have exclusive access to the hall, enjoy a great reception, and, of course, take in some amazing insights and perspectives from some of the top leaders in education technology from Silicon Valley. Due to the excitement and limited availability of the event, you are encouraged to go to www.zinch.com/NACAC-reception to RSVP as soon as possible. Admissions Live is sponsored by Welcome to College, where college visits are made simple. The mission at Welcome to College is to help students find colleges where they will flourish. The team at Welcome to College believes it's all in the visit and have created free web and mobile applications to plan, rate, share, and compare the entire college visit process. Parents and high school counselors can also create an account to share their impressions. Check out the new partners page at welcometocollege.com today. So I am, as I said, your guest host, Nicole Lentine. You've seen me on the last few shows. And I have two guests joining me tonight, both event planners at their own colleges, specifically in the admissions office. So Tim, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Like Nicole said, my name is Tim Lipman. I work at Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. I've been in the admission office for about 3 years now. I started after I graduated, so I went to IIT, and now I work here full time. Like I said, I've been doing events since I started for about 3 years, and I plan all the events on campus and off campus. I also work with our alumni to engage them in the recruitment process. It's kind of half my job, but most of my job is geared primarily towards on-campus and off-campus events.
Perfect, thank you. And how about you, Bret?
Hi guys, my name is Bret Dewhurst. I'm a Senior Assistant Director of Admission at Champlain College. I've been with Champlain now for about 6 years in this profession, but I did graduate back in 2007. So I've kind of been affiliated with Champlain now for about 10 years. I've been hosting events at Champlain for about 5 out of the 6 years, and I cover about 5 states from my territory. So it's been a crazy experience, but it's been great so far.
Awesome. Thank you both for joining us today. And it's fun. It's my first time, I think, having a colleague get to join me on Admissions Live from Champlain. So nice to have representation there. But we're very excited to have Illinois Institute getting represented as well. So we have a lot to talk about. So I'm going to just jump right into it. I think it's good to kind of set the scene for those that are new to admissions or new to events in particular, the different kinds of on and off campus events we have. And so if we want to talk about on campus at first, there's a lot of different events that are out there. So first and foremost, I'd love to talk about, I think the big ones, especially the ones that we're thinking about the most right now, are open houses. So Bret, do you want to start us off with some of the open houses that Champlain offers throughout the year?
Sure. So we offer a wide range of open houses for both high school juniors and high school seniors. We have 2 fall open houses that we host, one in September, one in October, and we followed it up with an ITS, which is an information technology and science open house, in November, as well as a gaming open house. One of our most popular majors that we have here at Champlain is in the gaming field within game design and game art animation, and so it ends up being one of our really popular open houses that students come to pretty much right before the first early decision happens. In the springtime, we do offer a winter open house in February. It's the coldest event that we host, but we still get a good amount of people that show up, as well as 2 accepted student days in both March and April, and we finish up the season with a June open house, usually the 2nd or 3rd weekend in June. So all the events basically, it's tailored around the academic calendar, but allows students both at a junior level or at a high school senior to really extend campus and see Champlain pretty much in its best light, with an opportunity to visit with all the faculty, all of staff, and really get to see everything that Champlain can offer in one particular day.
Awesome. And then Tim, what do you guys have for different open houses throughout the year?
Yeah, so we have 4 a year. We call them Discover IIT Days just because if we use the term open house, people think it's traditional where you can come anytime throughout the day and get the same information. That's not necessarily the case for us. We have kind of a set schedule, so we like to call them Discover IIT Days to kind of dispel that kind of open house naming. But we do two over the summer, so we kind of try to invite people, say, hey, come to Chicago, visit Chicago for the summer, but then also come check us out one of those days while you're here. We also do one in the fall in October, about mid-October, so right when peak application season for us. And then we do one in the spring that we gear primarily towards juniors, but we obviously open up to anyone. All our open houses are open to really anyone that wants to attend, but we target juniors and seniors as well as transfer students because we get about a third of our incoming classes transfer students.
Awesome. Yeah, and I didn't even think about the fact that we have two schools in two rather cold locations in the winter time, so I'd love to hear about the different events that maybe a school in Florida offers. I think, do you find that you have slightly lower attendance at your winter or your kind of colder season events, Tim, or is it pretty well distributed?
I think it's pretty well distributed. Summers definitely are more popular one just because students aren't in school. All our events are on a Saturday, so we try to avoid having them go miss school for our event, or if they have a day off. We do offer some events during holidays, so like we'll have one on Columbus Day when most students are off school. But really, it kind of the distribution is pretty equal. We don't do open houses in the dead of winter. Probably one of our largest events, which is not necessarily an open house, does happen in February, which is probably one of the coolest months in Chicago.
Yeah, my brother graduated from boot camp up there around that time of year. It is freezing. I thought Vermont was cold. Cool. Well, then that kind of covers some of the open houses. I know, of course, we're not thinking about them. Well, we're thinking about them, but not nearly in as much detail quite yet. But I know yield events are also huge. So, Bret, do you want to talk about some of the yield events that Champlain has?
Sure. So one of the biggest ones that we really offer is our Accepted Student Day. And as much of it as a yield event, it's also an opportunity for students that haven't visited campus to really come and showcase and see what Champlain is all about. With our Accepted Student Days, it has almost an 85% attendee rate in regards to about 85% of the people that decide to sign up for Accepted Student Day will end up showing up at Champlain on that day. And it has almost an 80 to an 82% rating in regards to students that do show up for Accepted Student Day. Pretty much 4 out of every 5 will end up enrolling at Champlain in that following year. Another event that we do host that we kind of are starting to tailor from in just an admissions event to a yield event is different bus trips that we host. We currently offer several bus trips basically during November. It's usually during Veterans Day weekend, and we find 4 or 5 markets where we think we can get a good number of students, and we invite the students up basically, not the parents, just the students, an opportunity to get them on a bus, bring them to campus, and they get to see everything that Champlain has to offer without that background and without the support of their parents. It's a really strategic way to get students kind of out of their comfort zone into an environment to see do they feel comfortable without being influenced by mom or dad at that point. And it's a really interesting way to see what types of students we'll end up generating here at Champlain.
Absolutely, and I know you mentioned kind of looking at the results and the success of events, and we'll definitely talk about that a little later as well, because I think that's just as much of an important part of looking at the events that we have through the admissions process overall. So, Tim, what did the yield events and accepted student events and those kinds of events look like over at IIT?
Yeah, we have one main large yield event on campus. We call it Preview Weekend, where we invite students, all admitted and deposited students, to come to campus, spend the night in our residence halls or with our fraternities or sororities. We allow them to sit on classes, meet with faculty. A lot of faculty will put on special sessions or lectures kind of geared towards just their field in general, so not necessarily a class, but kind of just an area of expertise that they enjoy. So it's really a chance for them to get a last in-depth look at IIT before they have to make their final decision. We usually do this at the beginning of April. So kind of we have similar yield events off campus where we try to invite students to come to this event where we really get that yield event. And just like Bret said, we also have about 80–85% students actually enrolling that attend this event. So it's definitely a high yield event, definitely important for us to keep doing this.
Absolutely, and that's part of the reason why I was excited, and the usual host of Admissions Live, Ashley, we were excited about talking about events because we realized they are so important, especially these on-campus events with such strong results and such significant rates. I know that when we look at the students that end up enrolling, such a huge amount of them haven't visited campus at some point in time. So the job that you guys do is very important, which I know is not lost on either of you, and the sheer amount of time you spend trying to make these events successful. So we talked a little bit about on-campus events, but I know that we do some off-campus events as well. So I know, Tim, you spoke last, but do you want to speak first about some of the off-campus events that IIT runs?
Yeah, so we actually do 2 sets of off-campus events. In the fall, we do information sessions. So actually next week and the week after, we're going to be going to Chicagoland area, to the suburbs, to kind of introduce IIT to people who may not be familiar with it. So we'll bring faculty, we'll bring students, we'll bring financial aid and admissions. Not the full staff, not everyone obviously, but we try to bring a good portion, and we'll then go out to different restaurants or hotels and just kind of do an information session about IIT. So kind of say, hey, this is what we are. Kind of give them a little overview, but then definitely invite them to campus. A lot of times people have never been to campus, have never really been to the south side of Chicago, which has a pretty bad rap kind of nationally as well as in the suburbs. So we're trying to dispel that, saying, hey, we're not associated with necessarily the south side of Chicago. So come see for yourself. Definitely things have changed. So we try to encourage them to come visit campus in the fall, and then in the spring we mirror those and do a similar reception, but this time it's for admitted deposited students. So we're definitely saying, hey, we know you've applied to us, you've been accepted. What kind of information, what kind of questions do you have? So we'll go back out to them. We'll bring the faculty, we'll bring staff, we'll bring some different other people kind of more important to that process with us, and we'll again go out to them, answer their questions, but then encourage them to come. Usually these are about 2 or 3 weeks before our preview weekend, so we say, hey, these are kind of chance to ask questions, but then come check it out for yourself if you haven't been to campus already. The preview weekend's a great time.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that, you're not just focusing on here's the information, we'll give it to you in your area, but come to see campus. It's still always going to be driving back to that visit, and come visit us and see what the campus is like for yourself. Exactly. And I know that's true for us as well. So Brett, do you want to talk about some of the off-campus events that Champlain runs?
Sure. So one of the big ones that we do is area receptions in the fall. The majority of our admissions counselors, we do travel to the 50 states, and one of the nice ways that we can have and work with students basically is area receptions. By targeting different areas, for example, like Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, we work with Hartford, Connecticut, Boston, Mass. We find areas where we think we can generate a lot of interest, and we will basically book out a conference room at a hotel or in a local area and invite 10, 15, 20 families to pretty much just chat with a number of people that are on campus that actually fly down or drive down to a specific location. We've had deans of different programs go down there. We've had our admissions counselors, our director has been down there. The president of our school has traveled basically to some of the area receptions as well, just to generate interest and to talk with families. And a lot of times some of these students, they have been to campus, but they want to connect with us on the road, and there's another pocket basically that they've never been to campus. They wanted a chance basically to chat with us, but they just can't get up to Vermont for whatever reason. And so it's a really good opportunity, both as a yield perspective, but also just as a new incoming student that's never seen campus to actually engage with us while we're traveling.
Absolutely. And then we talked a little bit too, and I'd love for you guys to share. There's also, we talked about on-campus events, off-campus events, and when we look in particular at on-campus events, open houses and the yield events come to mind immediately. But I know each of us, or each of the schools have each of the institutions have a different event that maybe doesn't fall underneath those usual guidelines, those usual expectations of those bigger events, but are both important. So, Tim, you had shared a little bit about scholarship days or scholarship day. Do you want to talk a little bit about what those are like?
Yeah, so Scholarship Weekend is definitely probably our largest event we do each year. It's not open to anyone. It's definitely an invite only. So it's students interviewing for our top merit-based scholarships. So it's there's usually 3 or 4 different scholarships that are offered that we invite students to come interview for. Some of them we nominate students, some of them they apply for it and they get selected to. So it's definitely a very busy time on campus because they're interviewing all over campus, but it's also like a fun time where they come and kind of get to see campus. So we definitely want to roll out the red carpet, but we also want to kind of show them the real IIT and not necessarily show them completely fake. But we definitely put our best foot forward as much as we can and show them the campus while they're here interviewing for this full tuition. So a lot of them are very nervous because they're interviewing, so we try to relax it, but it's also still we want that professional atmosphere. And even if students don't necessarily end up coming here to IIT, we still want to give them that experience of interviewing, going through that process. So that's definitely one of our biggest events that is probably takes the most coordination. It's probably 3 months worth of planning just for the event itself, and then obviously the coordination of who's coming, all that stuff is a whole other aspect of the event that takes a lot of effort.
Absolutely. It sounds like a lot to coordinate, especially we're going to talk a little bit about planning spaces and times, and I know I've had a little bit of event coordination experience myself, and that was my least favorite part, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Bret, do you want to talk about, I know we have Career Day coming up soon, so do you want to share a little bit about that since it's kind of a unique event?
A new event that we're hosting. One of my colleagues and myself, Sarah, we are actually going to put together a career day for about 25 to 30 families, and it's an objective to really target students who really don't know exactly what they want to study. You know, we have a lot of students basically at Champlain, about 1 in 4, that will come in not exactly knowing what they're interested in doing. And the career day allows them to chat with us one-on-one, chat with career services, work with basically our different curriculum, attend a class, and meet with a lot of different individuals to help them decide, is there a particular area that we can start focusing them in on. You know, a lot of students will come in being interested in communications, but not having an idea or, you know, a section in regards to, do I want to go into public relations? Am I interested in broadcast? Am I interested in filmmaking? And so this career day will allow students to kind of explore their passions in different areas, and we'll have students that are going to show up that have kind of an interest in certain areas, and we might have ones that absolutely have no idea what they want to do. And that's our goal basically, is to bring them on campus, show them what we can offer, but most importantly is get them engaged and figure out what they're interested in pursuing at a collegiate level.
Absolutely. And actually, Bret, I'm glad you brought that up too, to kind of, it's sort of targeting a more specific group of students. And I know that in the past we've had, you mentioned we have open houses that are specific to different majors, but I know in the past we had a Women's Day last year that we tried to kind of, we started announcing it a little bit too soon before the event to really get as much momentum, but I know that in the future we're going to be kind of putting a little bit more effort into some of those kinds of events. And Tim, I forgot to ask you about your women's event. Do you want to share a little bit about that too?
Yeah, Women's Day is one of the events because we're a STEM school, so science, technology, engineering, math are kind of our focus. And in general, the STEM fields don't have a high percentage of women, so we're definitely trying to do outreach events similar to the career days, where we're trying to target women and introduce them to the STEM field. So we open it up to high school students, but we even had some middle school students kind of express an interest in this, where we kind of give them hands-on activities to do. So some of our student orgs will do it. So they have like an ice cream making session. They did. We have a crab lab on campus where there was live octopus. So it was kind of showing that space, and then we had some of the students kind of interacting with the prospective students that are kind of trying to get them involved in the STEM field and kind of say, hey, women can go into the STEM fields. And a lot of times we'll bring back alumni that have been successful and kind of saying, hey, you can definitely do that. So it's definitely an outreach event, but it's also still a recruitment event because we want them to obviously come to IIT.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't mean to leave that out before. And Bret, have you had any discussions about a Women's Day in the future at Champlain? Like I said, I know we had one before, but have we been talking any more planning about doing an event like that?
I think so. I think a little bit. I mean, it's one of the events that I actually don't cover. I know a couple of the colleagues that get together and they work with it, and I think that's something that, especially here at Champlain, like we want to have more females. You know, we're lucky in the sense basically that we're getting closer and closer to a 50-50 male, but we're still 60-40 male-female, and I think that a women's event definitely allows us to start targeting and getting more females to campus and really engaging them, especially to get us closer to that 50-50 mark, which we've been trying. So we've been trying hard for a couple of years now.
Absolutely. I think both institutions are kind of in an interesting position. Usually I think the vast majority of institutions out there have a higher percentage of females, and we're some of the rare few colleges that have a higher percentage of males. So it's always something to kind of be thinking about, and I'm sure other institutions out there may have similar events. And actually, it's a good segue to briefly re-mention that anybody who is following the show, if you have any questions for Bret or Tim or myself, to use the Admissions Live hashtag, and I will make sure to answer it. I'm keeping an eye on that over on this screen while chatting with these guys here. So we talked a little bit to kind of set the scene about events, but one of the most complicated parts of doing events is really the planning. So I guess kind of looking at it in the who, what, and where kind of aspects of it, there's a lot of stakeholders that are part of events. So Bret, do you want to start by listing kind of some of the stakeholders that you have to consider when planning the different campus events that you are putting together throughout the year?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing basically is you look at the type of agenda that you want to host, you look at the type of event that you want to host, and you pretty much any single person that's going to have any impact, whether they're going to be there that day, they're going to be supportive of you up into the event, they're going to be supportive with you after the event, they're all considered stakeholders. And so one of the first things that I did when I started hosting events about 5 years ago is I set up individual meetings with as many people as possible, really just to try to get to know them, to try to engage with them, to show them, this is the way that I'd like to do events, and to start reaching out and seeing, is this something that's going to work well for the both of us? With the stakeholders that we have, we're working really heavily with 4 or 5 VPs. The president of our institution speaks at almost every single open house that we have. We have our director, we have our undergraduate admissions staff, our operations team, the marketing department, the dining hall, the event center, faculty, staff. I mean, there's so many people to really mix and mingle and work with and try to pull together a successful event that it's really important to kind of keep organized and figure out where that communication is working, where people are in line with, and make sure that everyone at the end of the day is on the same page.
Absolutely. And Tim, do you find the same at IIT? Are there any other kind of parties that you have to think about or start planning, and how do you coordinate with working with everybody for these events?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much exactly the same for us. We just got to get everyone that they may come into contact with on the same page, so that way that's the security desk, whether that's the residence hall, anyone that may come into contact should know that these students are going to be here, making sure they know the agenda, so if a student gets lost, for whatever reason, they know, hey, you should be in this hall, you need to be here, you need to be there. That way they can guide them back to where they are. So it's definitely a lot of email communications prior to, so it's kind of sending out, hey, these are the events for the year, this is what's going on. But then I also do sit-down meetings with our reservation office, so the ones that will actually book the space and kind of put the material on, like the tables, the chairs, all that kind of logistical stuff. I sit down with them before every event, usually 2-3 weeks, to go over all the final details. But we usually do one big one a year where we kind of say these are the general things to expect for the year. And then faculty is just kind of making sure, I have a contact at each of our departments, so making sure that they know who's going to be at our event, what information do the faculty need to know, who do I need to know, who's going to be there, are they vetted, can they speak to prospective students, are they comfortable, do they know what to say, do they know not what to say, that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of coordinating, making sure that, like Bret said, everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely, and that can be more difficult than one would think sometimes, to really get everybody kind of on the same message and making sure there's no rogue professors or students or somebody that's going to go off on a message that isn't really what the institution is trying to share with these students that are at the event. I think we forget sometimes at admissions that not everybody knows exactly how to share information positively for students. So it's important to get to reach out ahead of time. And you guys talked a little bit about time frames when you start coordinating these events. But Tim, how early do you start prepping for these events? How early do you start thinking about them? And you mentioned kind of some of the timing of meetings, but I mean, how frequently do you find yourself working on them? When do you really find yourself in crunch time? Like, what does that timeline look like in most events?
Yeah, so I do the planning for the full year, so our event calendar goes from September to August. So I start planning the dates in January, February, maybe March. So I have those dates set. I send those out so everyone knows. Like I send it to the stakeholders so they're aware of those dates well ahead of time. And then for the specific event, it would usually be the month before. Unless it's like Scholarship Weekend or one of our larger events, I usually go a couple months out when I start actually coordinating all the small logistics. But kind of figuring out who's going to be there, what the menus, whatever the case is, that's usually within the month, but prior to, so that way we're not necessarily giving information too far ahead of time and then it gets lost in a different department like the catering office, or definitely it's happened before where faculty say they're coming and then they forget about it no matter how many times you remind them. So try to get that coordinated a little bit later.
Absolutely. I think you got to find that fine line between not too soon and not too late to coordinate with everybody. Bret, how about the same question for you?
It's pretty similar. I mean, I'll start planning an event. I'll put it on everyone's calendar about 12 to 18 months in advance. I really enjoy getting those Outlook invites back basically the same day of an event that's happening in 2015, and everyone's panicking in regards to why they're actually getting this invite just yet. But the benefit basically is that it's on everyone's calendars. It gives them a chance to find out, when the events are going to be in 2013, even in 2014, so they can start planning ahead for it. When it comes time to start working on the nitty-gritty, the catering, and working with the event center, planning the room locations and whatnot, a lot of it does take place, like Tim said, about a month before, and then there's just constant revision up until pretty much a couple days before the event to finalize, to make sure that every room is booked but not overbooked, the food is in the right location, and there's always last-minute changes just to make aware of and try to coordinate. Usually, sometimes 2 days, sometimes even a day before the event. But I would say the most hectic time is usually about 2 weeks before the event, when all the pieces are falling in place, and then at that point it's just putting out small fires and trying to stay organized and just making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely. I don't think even the best event coordinator can prevent themselves entirely from having last-minute things to deal with, but you can kind of just plan the best you can. I like to go through like, you plan the best you can and kind of plan in advance for those small fires that you got to put out. So what kind of technology do you find is the most valuable for event planning? Especially, I'm hoping that some of our viewers maybe are either starting to plan events or event planners that are just looking for ways to make changes and make themselves more efficient. So what do you highly recommend? And since I'm kind of going back and forth, I'll go to you first, Brett, to answer what's some technology that you use.
Okay, so starting off, we use a program called EMS, which literally just stands for Event Management Software. It's a program that our event center basically uses to book all the rooms, book all the classrooms. It has a schedule over the next 3 or 4 years in regards to where all the classes are going to be, where there's special meetings and whatnot. We use that we can actually go into each of the rooms and actually book catering, book equipment. And so anything with media services, for example, any technology that the room needs, any sort of food that we need delivered at a particular time, can all be done through EMS. And so it's kind of like one software that organizes everything. It's time consuming, it takes a lot of time to plug all the information in, and there's a lot of people that have their hands in it, so you just have to make sure that the information stays relevant and that everything is getting added in correctly. But it's one of the best softwares that I've seen us use over the last 5 years that really organizes everything together in one particular location versus having to fight basically 3 or 4 different systems to get everything together.
Absolutely. Tim, how about you? What kinds of technology do you find you're using most often for events?
Yeah, I'm using mostly Google Docs, Google Calendar. IAT does have EMS, but it's definitely only used by the campus reservation office. So I work with the campus reservation office. They put all the information in there. So I tell them what to put in, and they do it. So we definitely use it. I just don't have any personal experience with it. But definitely Google Calendar. We're getting new CRM recruiter. So that's supposed to have a lot of front side access as well as kind of backside kind of planning information that we're able to kind of keep track of. We're just in the transition phase, so I'm not totally sure how that's going to work out and what's going to look like, but definitely it sounds like it's going to have a lot of information built into it, which is going to be nice to kind of be consistent, and then anyone can log in and see kind of what the budget is, kind of who's registered at any time. Right now, where we have 2 different systems trying to talk to each other.
Oh, that's never fun when you have 2 different systems trying to figure out the same information. I know we've had our woes with some technology that we don't love, so we're trying to transition out of registration sites that we don't love and things like that. So good to have things that will work well together. And speaking of woes like that, what are some of kind of the biggest hiccups and kind of the biggest stress points that you find you have to deal with events? I'm hearing a little bit of feedback from your audio over there, Tim, but hopefully we can get that figured out. Do you want to talk about some of the hiccups that you have?
Yeah. So recently it's been the registration process, trying to figure out who's going to register. Right now we have 2 different systems registering students, and we're trying to put that into a 3rd system, so it's just really complicated, and we're hopefully going to figure that out, and recruiters are going to solve all those issues. So that's probably right now been the biggest hiccup and biggest headache for me, is coordinating those details. But in general, it's kind of just coordinating with other departments outside of admissions, so other people that we have to work with. So whether it's faculty, who's going to show up, who's going to offer sessions, whatever the case is, it's kind of coordinating with them, knowing who to coordinate with, because sometimes it changes and they don't tell you. So you're kind of just off in limbo waiting for a response from someone who may not actually work here anymore. So it's definitely kind of those issues is probably tend to be the most difficult for me.
Absolutely. How about you, Brett?
I think the biggest things are usually the last 2 days before the event, when we'll have everything finalized and everything organized and everyone feels good and the office feels great, and then all of a sudden we'll get 3 or 4 things that just pop in that I think a lot of people don't understand, that when you change one room location, it actually can change a lot more, and it can take a lot more time than just simply changing one room location. And so when that type of information comes in the Thursday, the Friday before the event, it can take a couple hours to kind of bounce back and recover and make sure that everything is still staying organized. And so I think it's those last 2 days before, just making sure that everything is in place, everyone's happy, everyone's in the right spot, the food is ordered, and everything's organized in that sense. I think that's the most trickiest spot. I think that's where it causes the most stress.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about the broader kind of implications of events, and I'd love to kind of break it down to the day of, because this has all been talking mostly about the planning of the events, and that's why I knew we'd have a long show in store just to talk about all these details. So day of the event, I'll go back to you, Bret. Who are some of the people that get involved in these campus events the day of?
So we generally have at least one representative from each department that has at least some sort of hand in working with the students at any level, whether it become incoming students, prospective students, and whatnot. We have, on average, anywhere between 150 and 250 staff and faculty, as well as over 100 students that are working the event in some capacity. We have students that basically, our student ambassadors, they spend a lot of time the day before, the night before, just getting organized and getting all the package stuff and the agendas ready to go. But on the day of, it's managing 300-400 people to make sure that everyone's in the right spot and everyone's doing what they need to do to make sure that our families feel comfortable. One of the things that we've really focused on over the last couple of years, and something that I really pride myself in working with these events, is that we make sure that our families under no circumstance get lost at any time. There's never a situation where a family can walk to any sort of corner or any sort of location and not see at least one of our students or one of our staff members directing them where they need to go. When families get out of a session or they get out of a presentation, there's someone outside the door that's willing to help them get to the next location. And so we've been really lucky to make sure that we have a good full-size staff and faculty and a good student population that we can able to do these types of events. And that's, for us, has been really successful over the past few years, just in coordinating it.
Absolutely. How about you, Tim? Who's involved in the day of over at IIT?
Yeah, so very similar. We have, it will kind of vary from event to event, but mostly we'll always have someone from admissions there. We usually bring some of our current students. We generally pull from our student ambassadors that work in our office that are paid. So we definitely, that way we know that they're going to show up and they're actually going to be there because they're being paid to be there. We also, depending on the event, we'll usually have financial aid, someone from financial aid, faculty. Certainly at our open houses and our receptions off campus, we definitely get them involved. So it's kind of coordinating. In general, we'll have our full admission office staff, so all the counselors at the events, open houses specifically. And then we'll also definitely work with different departments, other departments on campus, so like health center, residence and Greek life, that kind of stuff, to have representation at the fair when all the students will have questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the student commitment to kind of have someone around on campus, so we try not to get them lost. But we ever say, if you ever get lost, come back to this building. Luckily, we're in Chicago where it's a grid, so it's pretty easy. We're a relatively small campus, so it's going to take no more than 5-10 minutes to walk from one end of campus to the other. So it's pretty small. Hope most students don't get lost, but occasionally we do get one or two that we get a call, and we usually go pick them up.
Well, that's nice to keep an eye out for them just in case somebody kind of wanders away a little bit in the wrong direction. Very cool. Well, then, kind of looking a little bit more at, we have all these people, all these moving parts, all these people to coordinate throughout the day, even just on our own staff. How do you communicate throughout the day between everybody who's working on these events? So, Tim, I'll start with you for that question.
Yeah, so we have had walkie-talkies in the past for the staff. We had poor quality ones, so we're looking at buying nicer ones that will actually work more than 10 feet away. But definitely phone and text is the preferred method right now. So usually our ambassadors will text our lead ambassador, who kind of coordinates with me and makes if anything goes wrong. He's usually right near me, so I'll work with him. I'll find out what's going on. Most of all the counselors have my phone number. All the faculty and staff also are given my number, so if they have issues, they show up to their room and it's locked. They show up and no one's there. Then they call me, and I usually say, hey, they're on their way, or I'll send public safety to open the room, whatever the case is. So communicating with IAT right now is just phone is probably the main contact, but like I said, we're looking hopefully to get walkie-talkies that will work a little nicer. And then we have a speaker to communicate with the prospective students and guests on campus, so everything is dismissed from our lobby, so we escort students everywhere they need to go. So we kind of have a little speaker to announce and kind of say, hey, if you're interested in the campus tour, go this way with this person, and we all have signs that they kind of raise up and walk away with.
Awesome. I like the loudspeaker idea. We definitely, I know, Bret, I'll ask you in a minute about the cell phones. I know we do calling and texting a lot too, but I think I'd be afraid to put a loudspeaker in your hands at an event.
Not a good idea. It's definitely not a good idea. Ours is very similar to Tim's. We use our cell phones. We're texting. We're calling each other a lot. I tell people usually the day before the event that if you want to reach me, just text me. Phone calls take too much time. Simple, quick messages. If there's a problem with the situation, if you need me to get across campus, a quick text message, I'll feel it, it's on vibrate, and I'll make sure I can get to a location with just in a couple minutes or so. We do use walkie-talkies for our bigger events. One of the fun things that we established, I think about a year and a half ago, is we started giving each other code names. So when we're walking around campus, we all have a code name that we react to and we set up, and it gives us a chance basically to kind of just ease the stress throughout the day as well. When you hear your code name come in sort of thing, it's never for a big situation. It's always just for something that pops up. If we were trying to figure out where another staff member is or where the students are, we always have someone that's available that we can make sure that we can handle any situation, or we can organize ourselves together in one location.
Absolutely. Handling stress levels is definitely always going to be important at any of these events, especially we talked a little bit about kind of troubleshooting issues that come up in planning the events, but how do you handle day of the event troubleshooting and issues that pop up? And I'll go back to you, Bret, for that question first.
Sure. So I honestly think that the majority of troubleshooting that happens, 99% of it is going to happen the day before the event or a couple days before. And if anything goes wrong on the day of the event, it's one of two things. It's either something that you forgot to do, or it's something that you don't have any control over. And it took a while to start realizing that if you basically are prepared and as prepared as possible, there's still going to be situations that you don't have control over that are going to pop up during the day of the event. And it's not really about basically just dealing with situations. It's being proactive and trying to think of as many solutions as possible for a situation, coming up with contingency plans if technology in a certain room doesn't work, or if the food is late, basically how to negotiate different situations. And I think one thing that we basically work well with is that with the communication, when we're chatting back and forth, especially with text messages, our campus is small enough that if there is a situation across campus, I can be there in 3 minutes and I can handle it. And 9 times out of 10, it's basically just the projector doesn't work, or a classroom is locked and we just have to get security in there and to open the classroom. And it's things that are just very small things that aren't really fires to put out. They're never a cause for concern. It's just an extra 2 minutes of running around and trying to take care of things. I consider events successful if I can pretty much spend about at least an hour or two in my office just trying to relax and try to get organized and stay organized. And if I'm able to do that, basically I always consider it a success.
Absolutely. How about you, Tim? Kind of what do you look at for day of the event troubleshooting? And then actually I like that Bret added in at the end, how do you gauge if an event was successful at least that day of?
Yeah, definitely. Most of our problems are going to be technology related. So if projector's not working, as Bret said, I'm usually running around. We also have building managers that we get through the campus reservation. So they're usually the ones that are setting up the building, making sure that everything's working. So it's just kind of finding those people and saying, hey, this issue is going on. Because sometimes I don't either have access to where the projector is, if it's like a big auditorium. So it's just kind of finding the right people to solve the right issues. Sometimes it's just people didn't read their email and say, oh, I need to be in this spot, or this is what's going on at this time. So they're just uninformed, which is unfortunate. So it's definitely something that we just want to try to get handled. Definitely, like I said, like Bret said, just trying to connect and getting to the issue. It might be just a simple thing that I just need to physically be there and say 1 or 2 words and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Absolutely. And then at the end of the day, usually if I'm not getting phone calls or texts or someone saying, hey, where is this? Why isn't this happening? Then I usually gauge a successful day. I don't have the luxury of our events are not necessarily anywhere near our office, so I don't usually come back to the office anyway. But usually I'll sit down and start talking with the staff and kind of seeing, especially as the day goes on, because in the end of the day we have tours, more kind of relaxing things. So our staff isn't doing as much. So if I have time to sit down and talk with them, that's usually a good day.
Absolutely. While we're talking about day of the events, do you have any funny or memorable stories to share about events? And Tim, you had a little bit of a story you shared in the kind of planning stages of this show tonight, if you wanted to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is definitely a memorable event that happened. So in the first 3 months of starting and taking over this job after I graduated, all of a sudden public safety starts walking around and asking people to get out of the buildings, and I'm like, what's going on? And at this time, all of our students are everywhere on campus right now, so they're with faculty, so they're in their different buildings. So I know where everyone is, but they're everywhere on campus. And then they keep telling people to get out of the buildings, and I kind of ask what's going on, and they inform me that they've received a bomb threat via phone. So that was not always something that you want to happen during open house, which is have 300 people on campus at that particular moment, and there happened to be a couple other events going on at that same time. So it was just kind of, what do I do? What's going on? Luckily, our vice provost was around. He gets on the phone with people that are higher up, because I tried calling our public safety office, and they were just bombarded with calls at that particular moment. So it was just trying to handle the situation, what to do, and he found out that they're going to be evacuating all the buildings and searching them until they can figure out that validate the threat or not. So all ambassadors started calling like, hey, we're being asked to take this families out of the building, what do we do? So we brought them to this large open park. Luckily, we happened to be away from all the buildings, so we were able to take them there, and then we kind of broke them into smaller groups and continued the day as much as we could. So definitely talking to students, students talking to families and trying to answer questions, and we try to keep them calm. We obviously kept them updated about what was going on as soon as we know. We're saying we did receive a bomb threat. Our public safety's looking into the issue, but definitely trying to keep them corralled. And then after a certain point, we made the decision to send everyone home because we didn't know when we get that all clear what was going to happen. So we wanted to keep families potentially in harm's way, so we made the decision to send them home. And it's definitely something that was extremely stressful, but I think we handled it well, because it showed our public safety responded. We had an IIT alert system which sends text messages to everyone, so we're able to definitely get in contact with everyone in the IIT community, which is nice. And then we've kind of followed. We did a very extensive follow-up, kind of saying we apologize about this. This is the first bomb threat we've ever received that we know of. We think it might have been happened because there was SAT testing that day, and some students had gotten turned away. So we think that might have been the reason. So we're not necessarily sure, but it definitely we definitely have a very extensive emergency response plan now as a university, and what to do in certain situations because of that. So it's kind of a learning experience, and just making sure everyone's well informed and you're not kind of just keeping people in the dark is memorable, but also a good learning experience for us.
Absolutely. You definitely get to learn from an experience like that, and it sounds like it was very well handled on your institution's end. So bravo to you guys, because that is a scary thing to have to deal with while simultaneously managing a couple hundred people on campus all at the same time. Bret, how about you? Any funny, memorable kind of stories? I mean, that was less funny, but definitely more memorable. But everything you
I have a couple. One of the first things that I do is that whenever I feel comfortable at an event, when it gets towards the end of the day, one thing I try to do is I'll actually jump into the mascot costume and kind of walk around as the mascot for a couple hours just to see how things are going, talk to families, high-fiving students, sort of thing. And it's really cool to see the perspectives that students have when you're just walking around in a giant mascot costume, and you can just tell how your event is going just based upon how many people are high-fiving you and how many people are chatting with you. Tim shared a horror story, so if you want a horror story as well that we had, Nicole, you'll remember this perfectly. We had an event a couple years ago, and our gym was leaking uncontrollably. It had rained basically for about 3 or 4 days before, and it was about, I think, 3 or 4 years after the gym came in, and it was the first time we had a significant leak. And one of our colleagues came to me in a panic at the time, saying, the gym's leaking. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? And I remember saying to her, I said, there's nothing we can do. We're going to host this basically. We're going to pretend nothing's happening. We'll put a trash bag down. We'll make it look pretty, and we're going to go forth with the event, because there's so many times and so many things that happen that you just have to run with it. You have to pretend that nothing's wrong, and you just have to keep going and moving forward with it. And so I think those are the 2 stories in the last 5 years of hosting them that have really just popped out. But I try to live that mascot costume pretty much almost every single event, as long as I feel confident things are going well.
Absolutely. I guess we'll take it as a sign that maybe it's not your favorite event if we don't see you in the mascot costume.
I've high-fived you at several events that you probably never even realized, so that's what's fun about it.
Yeah. I want to just briefly share my own memorable event stories. Before Bret took on events at Champlain, I actually planned a few, and it was not my favorite responsibility.
I know this story. Go ahead. It's great.
Yeah, you already know this one, but I drove up to campus at the start of the event, and there were 4 fire engines right outside of our gymnasium where the start of the event was happening, and I discovered that one of our fire doors that is meant to close when there's a fire in a part of a building slammed shut, and the person who was the only person who could unlock it was about a half hour away from campus, and it was all because an urn of coffee spilled on a fire sensor. So the half hour leading up to the event, we were scrambling like crazy, you know, just trying to figure out how to get this door open, and there were people on the other side of it. Luckily, none of the families. It was all, you know, teachers and staff, but it was memorable to say the least, and probably one of the biggest reasons that when responsibilities got switched, I very gladly handed over events to Bret.
You passed that to me pretty quickly, I remember.
Yeah. So to anyone viewing out there that manages events, hopefully you won't have events or, you know, issues that pop up like either of these that were shared, but think in advance and plan in advance just in case they do. Always good policy. So we talked a little bit about how you guys have gauged how successful an event was the day of, but how do you kind of look back at the event? What kinds of metrics do you look at? What do you kind of look at as a measure of success, you know, within the few months after the event and all the way up through, you know, once students are enrolling as well? What are some of the things that you look at? And I'll go to Bret first.
So I think Tim and I are going to have a lot of the same answers on this. You know, we do a survey. We use SurveyMonkey to poll all of our families. They'll get an email broadcast, usually the day after the event, from myself that just basically says, you know, we're really excited that you attended. If you have any questions or concerns, we're the ones to follow up with. And then we ask them if they can fill out a very brief 3 to 5 minute survey. It's a really quick survey. It's a lot of yes and no questions. There isn't a whole lot of information that they have to type into it, but there's chances for them to do so. And, you know, in addition to surveys, attendance rate is huge. You know, one of the goals that we have is really to try to increase our attendance rates. A lot of times families will sign up for an event, and I would love to get 100% of our families that actually sign up for an event to attend an event. And what ends up happening is about 15% of those families, they'll sign up, but they won't give us notification that they just can't make it or their plans have changed. And there's a lot of times where it's a last-minute situation, and we totally understand that. But if we could have a sense in regards to making sure that we have 100% of our families show up, or we have cancellations the day before, that makes everything look better. And so we want to see basically that attendance rate continuously climb up in regards to every event that we do host.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and how about you, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the same. We look at the attendance rate. We recently have had a slightly lower attendance rate. We would like to have a 0 no-show rate, but we've had it in the 20s to 30s no-show rate, so we're looking into that, reasons why. But definitely kind of looking at that attendance rate is definitely one of our biggest. Survey feedback, so like Bret said, we send an email out saying, hey, thank you for visiting, fill out the survey. But then also we'll look at the enrollment rate, so we'll kind of look and see, okay, how many people applied, how many people actually end up coming here, and sometimes that data is a few years out just because they're sophomores or juniors, so we don't get that data right away, so it's kind of making sure that we go back and continuously look at that data and keep track of it to kind of see if someone comes as a sophomore, does they have the same predicted yield rate as they would as a junior or a senior? Does that necessarily play out? So it's kind of looking at all the different data to kind of see, are they coming back, are they actually applying, are they coming and enrolling at IAT, and just kind of looking at those metrics.
Absolutely. It's great that you look a few years out, too, because sometimes that immediate feedback isn't necessarily going to be something that's going to be the most valuable. It's really, like you said, you know, looking if they did enroll 2 or 3 years after they're attending this event. Do you have different codes for different events that you run, too, that you put into a system to kind of keep track of which event they attended? Tim? Sorry, didn't specify who that was for.
Can you say that again? You broke up a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I asked, do you have a system where do you track specific codes and assign specific codes to different events that you run?
Yeah. So we, in the past, we used to have every code had a different activity, or I'm sorry, every event had a different activity. So it would be the year and the name of the event, and then all of our activities, we would have thousands of them after we had the system for 10 years. We've now changed over, so now the codes are just the name of the event, and then we create separate events within that code, so that it's kind of follows up. It's a little easier, so I can go in and I can click on event, and then Recruiter, which is really nice, will pre-populate basically a funnel for me. So it'll tell me everyone that's applied, everyone that has been accepted, how many people have deposited, and it's all live data, and it's updated since it's all tied in with our application process. It's really nice to kind of be able to pull that data. Unfortunately, I don't know how that's actually going to work since we just rolled it out and we're still in process, so I don't have any metrics to kind of see if it's worked or not. But it's kind of nice to tag that be able to tag that information in our system.
Absolutely. Bret, do you want to talk a little bit about the coding kind of system we have too?
Sure. I mean, we have a very similar system to what Tim has. We host a different code basically for every event that we have. If anytime a family visits, they come up. If they attend an open house, if they attend an area reception, basically any sort of communication that the family has with us, whether it be through an application, through a visit, through a travel experience, does get coded in some particular way. And we target these codes. We use the codes annually in regards to trying to figure out basically different trends. And so we can figure out how many families came in 2011 versus 2012. Are our numbers looking better? Are they looking worse? Is the attendance rate increasing or decreasing? And so it gives us a chance basically to look back a couple years and see how we're doing, and then also to project how we would like to do going forward with it.
Absolutely. And so that's a great way to look at kind of the success within the students who attended the events. How do you debrief when and how do you debrief with everybody who was working at the event? How do you take in feedback for things that worked well, things that changed? Because obviously, I mean, unless you're hiding in a mascot costume and running all over campus and checking in on things, it's hard to be everywhere all at once to know all the successful pieces of the event. So, Bret, if you want to start, how do you kind of debrief after an event to figure out what you want to keep and what you want to change for the following years?
Sure. So we basically, on the day of the event, a lot of times I kind of walk around towards the end of the day, not in the mascot costume, talking with VPs, talking with our directors, just kind of getting a consensus on how they're feeling. Usually if the higher-ups are feeling pretty good, then it's a pretty successful event, and you can kind of generate ideas just based upon how they're acting, how they're moving around, how they're engaged with families. In addition to after the event, we look at all the surveys that pop in. We look at any sort of feedback we get from families. We'll get emails, we'll get phone calls from families here and there saying what they liked, what they didn't like, and it gives us a chance to kind of reflect on that and moving forward. One of the things that always happens, usually about a week or so after the event, we'll try to get together with whatever group that we have on campus. Obviously, the fall is really challenging. The majority of us are traveling, but whoever's here in the office, we'll sit down, we'll kind of debrief the first fall open house, see what works well, and because we host 2 of those events, we can make any changes that we need to after the first one to tailor it to basically make the second one even better. I think in regards to doing it that way, especially with the accepted student days, we can have an event that goes extremely well, but we're always going to find different things that we can change, things we can update, and things that we can improve. And even just a simple half-an-hour debrief session allows us to make the next event even stronger.
Absolutely. Tim, how about you? Same question. How do you debrief after an event?
I mean, it's very, very similar. I'll try to walk around. I'll talk to the counselors. Faculty are usually gone by the end of the day. That we don't try to take up their whole day, so I'll send a follow-up email, usually the Monday or Tuesday after the event, just depending on the schedule, and we'll say, hey, how did this go? Did you have any feedback? Did you talk to really any good students and that we should know about that you had really good conversations? So we'll follow up with them that way, but we'll also follow up like, hey, how'd the schedule go? Did it work for you? Because sometimes we change it, we move around where they're involved, so we try to gather as much feedback from them. And a lot of times with outside departments, it's via email. With inside, we'll usually do like a sit-down, meet myself, our director, occasionally our VP, maybe some other counselors if they're in the office at that time. And we'll kind of just say, hey, how'd this go? What do you think? Anything notes? At the event itself, I'll usually have students taking notes when I kind of do informal debriefing at the event, so they'll take notes and then we'll go back and then we'll obviously look at the survey feedback and kind of say, oh, we changed this and people really did not like it, it didn't seem to flow right or whatever the case is, and we'll kind of take all those factors into account and kind of adjust our planning for next time.
Absolutely. I kind of want to combine the next 2 questions I had for you guys in one because I think they're both kind of interrelated. What kind of support do you get from your colleagues in the office that maybe aren't coordinating these specific events, and how can a colleague who isn't usually one coordinating events support you? What kinds of things can they do to help you through that planning process? So I'll go back to you first, Tim.
Yeah, so definitely it'll vary from event to event who's involved with the process outside. We're trying a new thing where all the counselors are going to be asked to be involved in the planning process for one of our types of events, so whether that's our Discover Days, our one-on-ones, our admit receptions, everyone will need to be involved in at least one event just to kind of increase their knowledge and kind of understand how the event rolls, so that way when they're at the event they can have a better appreciation for it. But then also they can kind of help distribute the day of tasks. So if I'm not someone maybe responsible for dealing with outside faculty, so if I'm not there to help, if I'm somewhere else on campus, they can help distribute the issues and kind of figure out those, put out the fire, so to speak. And then for those that necessarily aren't event planners, I definitely say try to understand the flow of the event as much as you can, and understand that it's really everyone working together, and it's kind of all about the coordination of everything, so that we can, as an event coordinator, we can plan so much and only do so much, but we rely on everyone to kind of fulfill their part. So it's kind of understanding how you fit within the larger piece of the event, and kind of trusting us that that if any major issues are going to happen, we're going to take care of it, and it's just, you need to kind of go with the flow.
Absolutely. Same question to you, Bret.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that my colleagues support me. I mean, Nicole, for example, the fact that we work together is fantastic. I mean, you handle the majority of the social media at our events, and I don't schedule you for anything in particular because you're able to mix and mingle. You can take pictures, you can work with our students, you can blog, you can tweet, you can do everything that kind of just gets people excited about that particular event, but also to attend events in the future. My two colleagues that are in my physical office are in charge of the student ambassadors, and so they're the ones that are they're basically creating the student ambassador agenda. So that's 30 additional people that I don't have to worry about because I have two people that jump in and handle that particular agenda for that day. In addition, I think that everyone helps out in their own way. The value of being an event coordinator is you're the one that's setting up the event. You're the one that's making sure that if there's any fires that are happening, that you're putting them out as quick as possible. But it's physically everyone that's there that day, which dictates in regards to being if it's going to be a good event or not. And one person, if they just have a poor or negative attitude for whatever reason, it can really deter from the event. And so it's my job to make sure that everything's going nicely, everything's flowing smoothly, but it's everyone's job basically to make sure that all the families are having the best experience possible. In addition to that, for event planner, for admissions counselors that are not event planners, one of the things that I think works out really well, especially in our office, is that everyone trusts me to do my job and to make sure that everything's perfect. I don't generally get a lot of questions in regards to, do you take care of this? Is this all done? Is this all done? Sort of thing. But one thing that a lot of admissions counselors can do is really look at the high end of things, look at basically the bigger picture, because we're basically about a week before the event focusing completely on the nitty-gritty. It's about booking those final rooms. It's about booking the final contracts and getting everything settled. And sometimes we lose sight of the big picture. We might figure out something big that we might have mistaken because we're so focused on particular areas. And so to be supportive basically of someone who's coordinating the event is someone that can kind of step back and say, here's some other suggestions, here's things that we can offer, and here's things that we can do to move forward. And sometimes just by looking at the bigger picture really helps the event coordinator out to make sure that the event is successful.
Absolutely. And I'm realizing we are rapidly approaching 8 o'clock, so I want to be cognizant of your time and the viewers' time. So we have a few other questions, and hopefully people can reach out to you guys. Bret, I know, I'm trying to remember your Twitter handle. Is it Dewhurst13?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So people can tweet at you with questions. They can tweet at me with questions. We haven't, I think, convinced him the value of Twitter yet, but what's the best way people can get in touch with you if they have questions after this broadcast, Tim?
Definitely email is probably the easiest. It's t.lipman@iit.edu. I'm also on Facebook, Tim at IIT. You can find me on Facebook for those that are using Facebook. I'm not on the Twitter, but IIT definitely is on Twitter. So if you need to get a hold of me, you can tweet IIT, and they'll get a hold of me.
Awesome, awesome. I had one big question, I think, well, kind of combining two questions, just to kind of wrap everything up. So what industries, and I'll let you guys kind of figure out who wants to answer this first, what industries do you look to maybe outside of higher ed to get input on how you can improve events? And then secondarily, going to have you have a two-part question here. Especially those who are watching the show that may be brand new to events, what kind of advice could you bestow on them, not only to look at these outside resources and outside industries to improve their events, but what advice do you have to give as someone who plans events that you can pass on to these folks that may be new to taking on events, or just people that are looking to improve their admission events in general? So anybody want to go for that one first? Yeah.
Tim, go ahead.
What's that?
Tim, go ahead.
Definitely always looking to outside industries. Not like constantly looking at outside industries, but definitely the hospitality industry in general. So hotels, anyone that deals with customers that are coming to look at or look at something. So museums, part of an association I'm a member of, CIFSA, Collegiate Information and Visitor Services Association. I'm putting a plug in. Is definitely a huge resource. It's kind of a collection of different universities and colleges from across the country that deal with visitors. So whether that's in admissions, whether that's in information centers, whether that's in visitor centers, it kind of varies from university to university, where at IIT it goes through the admission office, but at other universities it may go through a different office. So it's kind of working with your colleagues within higher education, but then also looking outside. So some things we do is we look into like I said, hospitality industry, and what can we learn from them? What can we learn from amusement parks? So it's kind of just looking at everyone and trying to see what the hospitality industry is in, because that's kind of what we're generally that's what the industry we're in within higher education. And then kind of advice for people looking into taking events or improving them. Figure out what works best for your campus. I mean, it's going to vary from campus to campus. Like, we have very similarities, Bret and I, kind of how we do things, but we're not going to be able to do the same things on the nitty-gritty level because they're not going to work at the same. So it's kind of working with everyone, listen to feedback, kind of gather feedback from everyone that's involved in your event, whether that's the students, whether that's faculty, whether that's your staff. Kind of listen to everyone, see what they have to say, and then don't be afraid to change it and evolve events. And don't just change things to change them, but figure out what needs to be changed, how can we improve them, and then implement those changes. Obviously, you have to have kind of certain authority to do that. You can't just say, I'm going to spend $200,000 on food, which would be nice, but definitely have to kind of be within reason. And I always say, every once in a while, kind of think about, if I didn't have to worry about money, I didn't have to worry about anything, what would be the ideal situation, and then how can I work at getting there? So it's kind of freeing all your restrictions, and then kind of being creative and letting yourself, what you need to do, and if you don't, then you'll kind of learn as you go through the process. Yeah, that's what I get. That's my advice.
Awesome. No, that's great advice to pass on, and I like that you even look to, the hospitality industry, the amusement park industry. I think we could learn a lot from that industry. Probably learn some don'ts too, but definitely a few do's as well. All right, so same two questions to you, Bret.
Definitely. So we also look at the hospitality industry. We set up partnerships with a few of the hotels in downtown Burlington, basically giving families as discounted rates as possible. We go as far as basically to provide shuttles to and from the event. It's kind of a cool strategy because our campus doesn't really have a whole lot of parking, so the more people we can get to campus without actually physically having to bring their cars here to campus, it's definitely helpful, and it really does cut down on some of the stress with parking in the area. In addition to that, we reach out to a lot of different event firms. I try to set up meetings with different event companies in Burlington, kind of just to get a consensus, really just to develop a partnership, to try to establish a connection and see basically which people and which individuals and departments are really able to work well with. In addition to that, we have partnerships set up in downtown Burlington at different restaurants, at different shops, at different establishments and opportunities. So when families come up to visit our campus, they can also see the best of Burlington, whether it be through discounted services or just opportunities they might not be able to have if they came up here on their own. We've done a couple trips basically with different mountains. Basically, I know Sugarbush up north of or south of us actually. We would set up some partnerships with them in some different mountains and resorts for discounted skiing on some of our events to kind of just give an incentive for people to show up, give an incentive basically for people to get engaged in Champlain and really see the Vermont culture for what it is. For someone that's new to the industry, that's trying to get involved in event planning, whether it be at the higher education level or just in general, the best thing you can really do is just make connections and, really get involved in your community and at your school or whatever establishment that you're at and really try to make those strong connections to have people help out. Just getting involved on your campus or establishment is one of the best ways that you can start being successful. And a lot of times, even those minor connections that you made 2-3 years ago, they come back and they really do help you in the end.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys both for giving those great suggestions. And like I said, we may have folks that will reach out to you after the event. This show will be archived along with all the other Higher Ed Live episodes and Admissions Live episodes. So I want to thank you both again for joining me tonight. I think it was a great show. It went a little longer than 8 o'clock, but there's nothing wrong with that. So I hope it gave valuable feedback to those out there that are event planners or thinking about helping their colleagues plan events or anything like that in admissions, or just trying to find ways to improve their events. So thank you guys once again, and I will be back next week to host Admissions Live. I think it may be my last guest hosting experience before Ashley comes back from her honeymoon, but we shall see. And as always, you can watch more shows from admissions professionals on the Admissions Live archive located at higheredlive.com. Thank you to everyone who joined in and tuned in live. Keep the tweets coming if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And guys, do you want to wave goodbye to folks watching before we head on out? All right. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.